Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Red Carpet. I'm Francine Brokaw. Today we're going to go take a look at the entertainment industry from a different viewpoint, from the view of a publicist. And with me is a special guest, a friend whom I have known for several years as a publicist, Jeff Hare. Thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you for having me here.
He came all the way down from Burbank, Glendale, something like that.
Same area, yeah.
But it's worth it because you have some fascinating stories to tell. First of all, I don't really know how somebody gets started in the business being a publicist. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about that?
I know that there are some communication classes and things in colleges, but I kind of took a different approach or a different path that way. I was living in Cleveland, Ohio, and I worked at the Cleveland Playhouse. I was an actor. I worked in the ticket office and then went over to the marketing department, and it was just a blast, and I was in that theater world and being an actor. And I was kind of a big actor in a big fish in a small pond. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to move to Los Angeles and I'm going to be a huge star, is what I thought.
That's what everybody thinks,
That's
right?
what everybody thinks. And I drove across the country with $400 in my pocket and the clothes in my car. Didn't know anybody here and just moved. And landed in Los Angeles, and I realized I wanted to be an actor, but I didn't want to be a starving actor. So I went to a temp agency here in town. And because of the marketing experience that I had at the Playhouse, they put me at the Walt Disney Company in the feature film publicity department.
That's where
it was
we met.
It was a week-long gig, but I loved it, and they loved me, and they kept me for 7 years. So I kind of worked my way through there, and that is where we met and where we started working together. And I just loved it, and I never looked back.
You never looked back,
No.
and you never said, oh, I wish I'd gone for acting.
I mean, every now and then I look back and kind of get the bug that I
Yeah.
kind of miss it a little bit, but no, I
you're-
found a career that I love.
And you're so good at it.
Oh, thank you.
You are, as I say in my book, Beyond the Red Carpet, you are one of the most beloved publicists
Well, that's very kind.
from all
Thank
my
you.
colleagues. And what you also say that journalists and publicists have more of a symbiotic relationship because we can't do our job without you, and you can't do your job without us.
Absolutely.
So that's. But then again, we run into a lot of publicists that are full of themselves, which you
Sure.
are not,
Thank you.
and want to run the show, which you do not. You're really easy to deal with.
I think it's important to work together to make sure that you get what you want and that I get what I need. And what we need as a studio publicist, most specifically, is that we have to sell a movie. We have to sell that project. We need a big opening weekend. We need something to happen, but we can't do it without people knowing about the film. So that's where you guys come in. And the
Right.
journalists who are our friends, we spend a lot of time together because we have a lot of movies that we promote. We see each other a lot. It has to be a good working relationship. You have to like me and I have to like you, and we might disagree on certain things, and I might not like the way somebody writes something, but I still know how important it is that a journalist gets to write their own way. There's plenty of people that you kind of hesitate saying, well, I got to see so-and-so today because you know it's going to be, they're a little crabby or a little too talkative or a little too friendly, whatever it is, but you still have to work together. And it's important for us to work as a team because we're more of a team than I am with the talent or a personal publicist.
You're right. Well, in roundtables, we do get some journalists who hog the whole thing.
Sure.
And have you ever had to step in and say, hey, let's move on?
We try not to do it in person, like in front of a bunch of people. We might have to take some people aside saying, look, you've got to have to let somebody else talk.
Yes.
You have to give some questions to people because they may not be writing this certain story that you are, and they need answers, much like you're from a family magazine. You can't use some answers that somebody's giving. You've got very pointed questions to ask. So
Right.
I think it's important for everybody to kind of play nicely, and we have had to take some people aside and say, well, I need you to kind of calm it down. And there are people that, like, especially in a roundtable situation, I don't want to be in a room with this person any longer, or don't put me in the radio room because I shuffle my papers too much and they're on microphone. There's a lot of give and take that we have to go through at every junket.
I mean, we all have our agendas, what we have to get from the roundtable or from interviews, and you've always been helpful to all of us. But let me ask you, I know you're very honest. What happens when you have a movie that really is bad? How do you handle that?
First of all, I love every movie I work on. only because there's a challenge in
Yes.
there. It might not be a great movie. It may not have the best sound. There's so many things about it that just went wrong. There are some movies that you have really high hopes for and it doesn't end up right. I love working on every movie because there's a challenge in there somewhere. I've gotten a lot of respect from my journalist friends because I'm very honest.
Yes, you
like
are.
You said.
That's
And
what we love you.
I make sure that they know that I'm not going to tell them that it's a great movie to have somebody write something really nice about something and then turn out that the movie wasn't great and I kind of lied to them a little bit. I always make sure that they know, hey, this movie's not great, but the lead actress is fantastic and you're going to love her, so why don't we do a story on the actress and mention the movie? So win-win. We get the story that we need. It talks about the movie, even if it's just a mention, and you get a story that's kind of keeping your journalistic integrity intact without over promoting a film that ended up being a dog. So,
Yes. Well, I've never written. I have written about a bad movie, but I will write something good about it versus saying this is a fabulous movie. This actress did a great job, which is what you do. You try and
Just
point us
find
into something
yeah.
that is worthwhile that readers or viewers want to know about.
well, all too often there are writers that want to write bad things. They relish in the fact that something
I know some.
it's bad, and it's hard because justifying inviting them to a junket or justifying having them sit with the talent for any length of time is hard sometimes, knowing that this is going to be a tough one to get through. And do we protect the talent or protect the movie? Sometimes yes, but most of the times we need the coverage somehow, and it's you kind of weigh the options and you manage your risk.
Yeah, well, you need us and we need you.
Absolutely.
Here we go again.
We're back to that relationship.
Now, I have dealt with a lot of actors. Good, bad, violence. I mean, have you ever had any experience where it's become maybe a little bit, I don't want to say really violent, but something messy?
Plenty.
You don't have to name names. I mean, we're not naming names because we have to deal with these people.
I've been doing this a long time,
Yes.
and I've dealt with a lot of people, and I've gotten the good and the bad in there. There's plenty of people that you would think, oh, this is going to be a rough weekend because I hear this talent is just not great, and they become like one of my favorite people. They're just lovely, and their persona maybe off camera or on camera is not the same as it is off.
Right.
Some people I really love. I've had some bad things. I've had those actors that say, don't look me in the eye, don't speak directly to me, those kinds of things. There was one situation in particular that I got hit by an actor.
Aye.
We were doing a movie, and he didn't have a publicist with him, and he was asking me what we were going to be doing for the day. So I was running down the schedule with him about the TV interviews that we were going to do, the roundtables, and some of the one-on-one print interviews. And as we were doing that, he said he was not going to do a specific outlet because they did a negative story on him in the past.
That's understandable.
And I thought, you know what, fair enough.
Yeah.
I am going to go tell the studio that you're not doing them. I'll go tell that outlet you're not going to do them, and I'll come back. And he was then also being kind of grilled from another outlet, which he did not like, got out of his chair and ripped his microphone off and kind of saw me at the end of the hallway there by the door leading out and just decked me.
Aye.
And it was out of frustration and it was out of anger. And that was the first interview of the day. So that it started a little rough.
Oh, yes.
And I knew that it wasn't directed to me.
No.
I just happened to be the person that had to take the brunt of it. And things like that happened. And by the end of the day, so apologetic and was so kind. Had to see him at the premiere a couple nights later, and that was an awkward situation as well. But you know, stuff like that happens, and maybe one day I'm going to write my own book, and I'm going to put tons of stories in here.
Are you going to name names?
At that point, I'm probably going to name names.
I have a friend at Disney, we both know, who said that when she retires, she's going to write her book, and she's going to name names.
There are a lot of stories.
There are. I did not name names mostly in my book because I'm still working, and
Right.
I still have to work with these people.
Yeah.
But, you know, if there's a movie that you really, really like, I know there's several of them, are there specific journalists that you really want to get in there because you know that they're going to really write it up and be something?
I think it's less about that approach and more about being strategic. I think what you want to do is not just check off your list of saying, well, all right, I've got an LA Times story, here's an Entertainment Weekly story. You want to be strategic, and you want to make sure that the people who are reading the story is the people who are going to love the movie. And certainly, if I know that you're going to love a film, I know that you will write it more effusively. You're going to be more flowery with the way you talk about it. So absolutely, we'll be strategic about the writers that we bring in, but we're also strategic about the outlets we go to. Again, you write for a family magazine, so very often, most specifically, every movie at DreamWorks is right up your alley.
I remember when we did Phantom of the Opera. I went, and I always go to a screening with my notebook, and I'm always writing notes during the movie. So, that kind of pulls my attention from the movie. But I got a message from you after the article posted, and you said, this is really, really good. And I felt so good that
nice. We do read your stuff. I mean, to all journalists, we watch and we read and we listen, and we know kind of the people who are good writers and who are actually kind of getting the point of being invited to a junket. Again, we don't want to make it like really boring, but there's a job that we both have to do.
Yes. Well, I liked that movie so much that I asked if I could come back to another screening, and you said absolutely. So I said, this time I'm not taking my notebook. I'm just going to go enjoy the movie.
Nice.
And that's rare, because as a journalist, I'm always thinking, what am I going to write? Do I need this quote from the character on the? It's always the way. So I never just go in enjoying the movie, but that time I got to enjoy Phantom of the Opera.
I love that. Well, let me flip it around a little bit. So you, as a journalist coming in from the studio side, do you enjoy the process of getting invited to a junket or getting put into a situation like that? Is this hard, or is this just part of your job?
Well, when I first started, it was part of my job, and I have basically been weaning myself down just because traffic. For me to go into a junket, it takes an hour to drive in, and I do the junket, and then an hour to drive home, and then transcribing the whole thing is a pain in the neck.
Sure.
And then writing up the article. And a lot of times, it's, especially for a movie that's really not that great, it's a lot of time invested in it. But
and it's tedious. You don't want to do this anymore. You're like,
no.
well, I don't want to think about this movie anymore.
I did it for 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
And I figure now I get to pick and choose. Because at the very beginning, I would do everything. And awards season, I would go to 2 and 3 movies a day. And it just, for several years, that was my life. But after a while, and at this age, I kind of want to take a step back and just pick and choose.
Right.
But we talked about the guy who decked you. I'm assuming it's a guy.
It was a guy, yes.
What about some of your favorite actors that you've managed to work with?
I got lucky. The most recent position that I held at a studio, I was the head of publicity at DreamWorks Animation. And part of my job was to be with, most specifically, the filmmakers and the actors. But the filmmakers were kind of I was their caretaker throughout the entire process. And I got to know them because a movie, it takes 3 years to make a movie. So you've been working with them for 3 years, and by the time the movie's ready to promote, we're good friends now. So I was very lucky that for 6 of the 7 years I worked at DreamWorks, I traveled around the world 2 or 3 times a year. And we'd do 16 or 18 countries at a time.
I think I want your job now. I think I'll trade.
It was fantastic. It was, like I said to you earlier, it's sometimes when you find something you love doing, it's not a job. So I don't feel like I've been working for a long time. I feel like I've been on vacation for a really long time. It's a lot of work.
It is.
But it's great fun. But we would travel around the world, and you are in close proximity to these talent that are kind of now your friends for weeks at a time. And you're eating every meal with them, and you're on planes with them, and traveling and waking up and going to sleep next to them on a jet or something. And people like Antonio Banderas and Selma Hayek, I had probably one of the best times of my life with. And
I like Antonio. He was
we
very
traveled
nice.
all over the world and literally became friends and spent a lot of great time together and in different countries, and it was just a blast. So people like that, there are a lot of people that you think are like the sweetest people on camera, and then you meet them and you're like, well, you're not that person at all.
No,
and of course I know that everybody is really truly just another human being.
Well, that's the rule. You don't really want to meet your heroes because they will definitely, except for I really enjoyed, I always enjoy Shirley MacLaine, but who was it I was talking about earlier? The Great Race. James Garner.
Oh, yes.
James Garner. Oh my gosh, I wish he would have lived a lot longer so I get to have more time with him, because he just was so amazing. And I find that for some reason I'm enjoying now the more veteran actors. The young ones come into, I mean, I don't know if this has happened to you, but I had a junket and they start maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock. This guy comes in, brings a bottle of beer into the round table, sits it down, puts his feet up on the table. How would you handle that as a
Well, I actually had something. I have two quick stories I'll tell you, and I'll name one name because it's a good story. I'll tell you all the good names.
Okay.
The bad names I won't. Even though this isn't a bad story, I was waiting for my talent to arrive to the Four Seasons Hotel where we were doing the junket, and it was early. It was about 7:45, and I got a call on my phone. I didn't know the number, and I picked it up, and it was my talent, who was in the car on his way to the hotel, and he's like, I need 2 Bloody Marys waiting for me in my room when I get there. And showed up and downed them both and says, all right, let's get to work. And I'm like, wow, he needed a little pick-me-up first thing in the morning. The other story, and this one is a fun story, and one of those people that you meet and you're like, I just love you, you're fantastic all the way through, was Woody Harrelson.
Oh, I loved him too.
He's fantastic. We were doing a movie, I think it was North Country, that he was in, and he was my talent for the weekend. And one of the things that you know all too well is when talent are doing roundtables, there's 5 or 6 tables that are starting at the same time, because what the whole idea of a roundtable is to have everybody sit down, and then 20 minutes later, everybody gets up and moves tables, and then it's a whole process.
Yes.
You can't start those until all of the talent are there.
Right, because they all have to start at the same time in order for them to keep moving.
Exactly. I'm very good about keeping my talent on time and kind of a regimented schedule in fun. So it's not, I don't make it like a military exercise, but it's a fun day, but I get them out really quickly. I run a tight schedule. Woody, of course, my talent that day wasn't there. So I kept going up to his room and knocking on the door, and he just wouldn't answer the door. Well, finally, the final time, I was walking down the hallway and I heard this Enya music playing like really loud. And of course, it was from Woody's room. So I had to wait till there was a quiet part of the story, and I knocked on the door, and he opened it up, and he was just kind of standing there in shorts and a t-shirt, no shoes or socks, and a bunch of people in the room, including his publicist. And I said, we really need to get downstairs and start this interview. And he's like, I haven't had breakfast yet. I said, Woody, we really need to get going. And I walked into the room, and he was on that macrobiotic diet, and he was eating like frozen pineapple, but dipped in what looked like black sludge. And it just looked awful. And I said, are we able to eat that on the way? He's like, I'll make you a deal. You eat a piece of that and I'll leave right now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna take one for the team. And I ate a piece of pineapple in this black sludge, and it was terrible. It was awful. And he's like, all right, let's go. And we just walked, and he went down barefoot and started the interviews in his t-shirts.
See, I didn't go to that junket, otherwise I would have remembered him barefoot.
It was a blast, and it was one of those funny stories that I'm like, you know what, took one for the team, but it was great. It was fun, and he was a delight all the way through.
Yeah, well, okay, so you're the studio publicist, and the talent has their own publicist.
Yes.
So do you guys butt heads very often?
We do butt heads, but for specific reasons. I never understood it until I became really very good friends with a personal publicist, and I asked the question, why does everybody have such why is it so hard for us to work together on things? And what I didn't realize is a personal publicist isn't worried about just this movie, where the studio, that's what my main objective is. I need to sell this movie. They need to sell this movie, but the other 2 projects they're working on, and maybe a charity thing that they're doing, and they're launching a beauty line. So there's a lot of other things that are happening in the talent's life that we don't have anything to do with. So they have to save some publicity for this project, and some publicity for this project, or they're going to go on Good Morning America for this, so they can't go on the Today Show before them for this movie because they're doing it. There's all kinds of things. But then you also run into an outlet might have run a bad story. So we are no longer putting my talent on that show or doing an interview with this magazine. So there's a lot of things that we aren't privy to that have happened in the history of the publicist and their client. that we just have to understand. And
yeah, well, that happened to me once in one round table. There was probably about 8 journalists around, and then they were going to bring in the next actor, and they came and got one journalist and took him out. That person was not allowed to be in there when that specific actor was there.
Okay.
And then when that actor left, they brought the journalist back. So he was blackballed from a certain actor. And
it happens.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I don't think I've dealt with that much. I have had to have conversations with people, like we talked about earlier. It's like, I need you to calm this down a little bit, but I don't think I've ever had to like actually blackball somebody. I know going in that this is not a mix. There's no reason for Playboy magazine to come in and interview the cast of an animated film. It's like that kind of thing. I know those kind of issues, but I don't think I've ever really had to blackball. Even though I've wanted to, I've never had to.
Well, you're too sweet to do that.
Well, you say that now.
But okay, I did write about in my book that a pretty well-known actor came into a round table as a duo with his co-star, and this guy was totally stoned.
Okay.
He could not talk. I mean, his eyes were just twirling, and I was thinking if I were the publicist, I would have pulled him. But how do you handle that? I mean, is that the personal publicist that should have just come in and taken him out? In
a situation like that, if it was my talent that I saw kind of incapacitated, I would probably, the first thing I would do is go to the studio executives and say, I don't know that this is the right thing to do, because we're going to put him in front of journalists who are going to obviously know something's wrong, and he's going to be acting erratically, or something's going to happen that, like, it's going to look bad on the movie, but it's also going to look bad on them, because we certainly want to protect the talent as well. And then I would go to their personal publicist and say, are you sure you want us to do this? But I would never assume anything and make a decision like that on my own. I would make sure that the collective team was in on it.
It's a team effort.
And everybody has to weigh in, because I think everybody has a vested interest in it.
Yes. So what advice would you give to somebody who is watching us and maybe doesn't want to be a writer, or says, well, you know, being a publicist is kind of cool. How would they start?
There's a lot of different ways. Now it's, I think people are looking more toward the college degrees in communications and marketing. I don't have a college degree. I went right to work right after high school, but because I think PR is all personality, that's a big part of being a publicist. It's also the level of kind of stress and responsibility is massive.
Now, I'm glad you brought up stress, because you did have an actress, we won't name names, who stressed you out so much you had to go to the hospital. I was put in the hospital, yeah. We did a junket and a premiere. That was pretty massive for the day. I mean, it was back in the days that you might see a premiere like that once every 10 years. They're a little bit more commonplace now, where you're shutting down streets and building tents, but this is a pretty big one. And I was with this actress for a week, and every day it just got progressively worse. It was so bad that by the end of the week there, I was so sick that I didn't even, I mean, I got to the premiere and then just ended up just going and sitting down and went into the hospital. Everybody else came home, and I had to stay out of town for 2 more nights in the hospital, just out of stress and being like massively sick because of all the stuff I went through. Yes. It's not easy, but it's really fun. The bottom line is you've enjoyed your... Oh, I love it. I want to keep doing this. And you are so good. Oh, well, thank you. You are beloved by every journalist I know. They would love to work with you. Respect that. Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate you coming down. This has been great, and you've given the viewers a different aspect of the entertainment business, because they usually hear writers or producers. I mean, now a publicist, so that's really cool. Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. Oh, this is great. You'll come back again if you have more stories that you can think of. I will do it. And we don't have to name Maybe names. When I write my book, I'll come back and promote it. Please, definitely. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. This is Beyond the Red Carpet. I'm Francine Brokaw, and we will see you next time.